I live in a small town, so some things that happen here may not happen in bigger places. This happened about 7 years ago. I had ordered 2 desks for my sons. My ex, their dad, had promised to come out to help them put the desks together. When the delivery man was scheduled to come, I let my ex know. He had taken the boys on a short walk and would be back any minute. My neighbour, who lives behind me, breeds and trains dogs to become guide dogs. I love those dogs. They patrol my yard and often come to me for treats and petting. Anyway, I have a rack where my boys can put their man-sized boots. The delivery man came, and I asked him if he could put the desk kits inside my home. I got a weird vibe from him. I had learned a long time ago to never ignore my instincts. He started making small talk, then asked a question that I knew wasn't appropriate. "So, do you live alone?" Instantly, my guard went up. I answered, "I wish. I have my teen sons. They often have friends coming over. Like, every day. Family members also visit often. Some live next door. I swear my place often feels like a revolving door of friends, neighbours, and family members constantly coming over. My boys and their dad will be here any minute." Then, he got this weird look on his face and asked if I was seeing anyone. I became extremely uncomfortable, and my instincts were screaming danger. It was hard to keep a polite face and pretend nothing was wrong. He had finished putting the desk kits in my living room and wasn't leaving. I was wondering how to be truthful but not revealing. Right as I started to say something, my boys and my ex came up. The kids ran up to tell me that their dad had taken them to the store and showed me what they got, before getting really excited about their desk kits. My neighbour's dogs came over and started growling at the delivery man when he walked out. My ex-husband got the same vibe that I had. My ex is a skilled fighter with excellent instincts, and he was on instant alert. The delivery man finally left. I was getting my phone to report it just as my ex asked me if I was going to report it. Now here's where small town living comes in. I reported it to a woman who gossips a lot, and if someone wants information, they go to her, as well as to spread an invitation to a party. She also happened to be a manager at the furniture store where the delivery man came from. I found out through her that I wasn't the only woman that had called to report or complain. He was fired. A few days later, I got a call from a couple of old busybodies who wanted more information, which I gave them since I figured that this was important enough to let others know. But holy cow, that was extremely scary for me. I grew up in a small town in Australia. My twin brother and I would frequently ride our bikes around the neighbourhood when we were growing up, around the late 2000s and early 2010s. There was this one house we'd pass that always left us uneasy. A weird and deranged-looking man would sit on a camping chair and drink on the side of the road outside his house. All the grass in and around his yard was extremely overgrown and unkempt. We thought nothing of it, but we always felt the same sense of dread whenever we rode past. Several years later, around 2017, there was a news article about 2 men who had gotten into a fight, resulting in one being stabbed to death. The mugshot that came up on the news showed the man we had always found creepy. It happened in that same household that we'd frequently ride past, just a block or 2 away from mine. It might not seem like much, but it has always made my skin crawl, knowing that I came face to face with that deranged psychopath on multiple occasions, and that I only lived a short walk away. I still live there, and I've heard nothing more about it. I hope he is locked up for life. In around 2018/2019, I, 25F, at the time was 18/19, was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in Nebraska, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones, right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool, and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was and am still quite scared of the dark. So I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting, and the nearest neighbour was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to and from his place if it was late at night, but I never had anything happen until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding two-way road that had big trees on both sides, and you pass one of the city's biggest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down, listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch-black road with thick forest on both sides, and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of 3 or 4, a tall, slim woman, an average height man, and a child. Short hair, but I couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing, and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old. The mother was pushing a freaking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered, but not nice. They were also not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they had been walking in the pitch black. They were all facing away from me, walking completely silent in the middle of the street, in the same direction I was heading. I turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane, or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all at the same time stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backward for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it in the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked completely empty. This is the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of 3 reactions. They either immediately think I'm freaking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery / assault / etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself, probably for the rest of my life, that it was the first option. This happened back in the fall of 2016. I live in a very small and rural community where everyone knows everyone. The state I live in allows for rifle mule deer buck hunting in the first week of October, Sustenance hunting is very important in the culture of my area. This fall, I was lucky enough to have drawn a buck tag. I had made plans to hunt on my grandmother's farm on this evening. Given that I am a smaller woman, I had asked my husband to go with me in case I killed something, so that he could help me pack it out. He could not go, however, due to work obligations. Fine, no problem. I have hunted this farm many times by myself. I know it like the back of my hand. I strapped on my boots, grabbed my rifle and binoculars, tucked my cell phone into my pocket, and made my way to my jeep. My grandmother's farm consists of corn, bordering an alfalfa field along a river. Between the river and the farm are lines of old-growth trees. This is the perfect place to fill a buck tag. I parked my jeep about a mile upriver from the fields, then began walking along the tree line toward the area where the deer had mostly been feeding. At the opposite end of the field, there is a large haystack where all the harvested alfalfa is stored. As I saw it coming into my field of view, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I kneeled down and viewed the area through my binoculars. I could see a very tall, large man walking briskly towards me from behind the haystack. I knew for a fact that I was supposed to be the only one hunting this farm on this night, as I had just spoken to my grandmother. Something inside me told me that I needed to get out of the area as fast as I could. I initially tried to turn around and walk back down the trees to my jeep, but given I have such short legs, this guy was quickly closing the gap. He was still several hundred yards from me, so I decided to try to cross the river instead. I found that the river was too muddy and deep for me to safely cross. I thought my only option was attempt to get a signal on my cell phone. When he walked across a small ditch and disappeared from my line of sight, I quickly darted into the corn and kept quiet. I could hear him walking closer and closer. I desperately tried to call my husband. Back then, the closest cell towers were over 30 miles away, and cell service was extremely spotty. I could not connect to my husband or 911. By this point, the man was within 100 yards of me. I could hear him ripping corn out, stomping around, and loudly cussing.
Where the f*** did you go?
Another issue is, it was getting dark quickly. I definitely did not want to be in the dark alone with this man. I watched him for a few minutes and was able to determine that he did not have a gun. After weighing my options, I decided to step out and see if I could de-escalate the situation, as I work in healthcare and work with mentally unstable people all the time. I stepped out of the corn. "Hi, I'm sorry if I interrupted your hunt or something. I didn't mean to cause you any harm," I said with a sweet smile on my face. I made sure there was at least 80 yards of distance between us. His eyes locked with mine, and it was obvious that there was something wrong with this man. He stood about 6'5" tall. His clothes were absolutely filthy, stained with what appeared to be his own waste and sweat. His shirt was torn and had dried blood on it. His face was crooked, as if he had a stroke prior, and he slurred his words.
"There you are!"
he yelled. He reached down and grabbed a massive stick. I'm talking a stick at least 5 feet long. He could have easily killed me with this stick. I stood my ground, grabbed my rifle from my bag, and pointed it at him. He stopped holding the stick. We looked at each other for a second. Then he began yelling.
"Do you know whose farm you're on?"
I stated, yes, this is my grandmother's farm. I've hunted it my whole life. The veins began to pop out of his head.
"No, this is not. My wife is hunting in this cornfield and you ruined it. Because of you, she missed a huge buck, you stupid bitch."
He became so enraged he started making strange growling sounds and started spitting everywhere. I was running through the options in my head at this point when he suddenly started to lunge at me. I turned the safety off my rifle and loudly stated, "Stop! I will shoot you if I have to." He froze in his tracks and just stared at me for about 30 seconds before dropping the stick. He grunted loudly, with his eyes darting around. "Listen, I don't want to have to do something that we will both regret. I am very sorry that I ruined your hunt. If you turn around and walk away from me, I will leave," I calmly explained. I could see him thinking hard about what to do next when he mumbled, "Fine." Then he turned around, stomping towards the haystack. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. I was not about to turn my back on this man, though. I watched until he walked a distance away, and then I darted back into the corn. I thought back on how he said I spooked a buck and ruined his wife's hunt, but that did not make any sense. I had a good view of the whole field, and there were no deer present. I decided to observe him through my binoculars. I watched him climb up to the haystack and get into a small 2-door white car. He quickly peeled out of the haystack lot. I was able to catch that the car had California license plates, but nothing more. I live nowhere near California. He took off down the road, and he was alone. No one else was in that vehicle. I ran back to my Jeep and locked myself in it. I sped home as fast as I could and told my husband what happened. I had never seen this man in my life, and neither had my husband based on my description. We live in a community of about 200 people. Born and raised here, we know everyone. I called our local sheriff, and they came out and took a statement. I took them to the haystack where he was parked, and we found a knife lying on the ground. Of course, nothing was able to be done, as I wasn't able to get a plate number or name from the man. To this day, I still have no idea what the man's intentions were, even though I could guess on a few. It's been 8 years, and I have never seen this man again. I also decided that I'd be hunting with a buddy from then on.
Wolf